My resources come up really high in Google results because Google doesn't have to go through a paywall to get through my stuff.
So completely organic growth, up to 2 million users.
Providing multiple versions of content and seeing how that affects learners, but then also having AI to help us.
Welcome to the Tech Transfer Podcast. I'm Dave Brown. I'm here with Royce Kimmons, who is a professor in Instructional Psychology and Technology here at BYU, and we're talking about EdTech Books. So what is EdTech Books?
Yeah, so EdTech Books is an open publishing platform. So it's designed to make textbooks or journals or any other kind of academic publishing or educational materials freely available online. And so it's intended to empower faculty or other experts in the field to create resources that are going to be high impact, that they can then freely distribute in a high quality medium to as many people as possible to share educational materials and to make learning more available to the world.
That's great. And so edtechbooks.org, anyone could go and browse over there and look at it right now.
Yep.
I remember when you were just starting this probably 2.5, 3 years ago, and you talked to me about it, and it sounded like a great project, interesting intellectual property issues. I thought, well, academics will use that, but way more people used it than I thought would. How many people have used your site?
Yeah, so we're up to about 2 million users a year. It started here at BYU, but very quickly it started both in terms of people using it and the people actually creating resources on it. It quickly got overturned. So we had more people outside of BYU using it and creating resources on it than people inside BYU. Currently, we have more users outside the United States using it than people inside the United States, and far more people creating resources on it that have no affiliation with our university. So it's very much kind of created this groundswell of interest in terms of both people who want access to the materials, but also people who want to contribute to building these kinds of materials and sharing them.
So completely organic growth, up to 2 million users in a pretty short period of time as well.
Yeah.
So when users use it, so they're open source textbooks, so we can picture what that is like, but there are some bells and whistles and good features of the website. Can you walk us through, like, say an academic wants to put a book on a textbook, what's the experience?
Yeah, so they log in, they don't have to create a new account or anything, they log in with an existing account either through Google or Orchid, which is a common academic login mechanism. Mm-hmm. So they log in, they just click create a new book, like you would with a Google Doc or something like that, and they can just create chapters. And as they're creating chapters, there's just an editor similar to like Google Docs or something, or a similar kind of editing tool. So it's intended to be really usable, really user-friendly. There's no programming to learn or anything like that. And then on top of that, so they're creating these resources. They can embed whatever they want inside them, things like YouTube videos or links to other resources or data sets. But then on top of that, we layer a bunch of other tools and beneficial bells and whistles as well. So things like when they create their materials, we automatically convert everything that they create into PDFs and Microsoft Word documents on top of the mobile-friendly HTML version. So someone in India, for instance, who might have limited bandwidth or might only have access when they're in an internet club or something like that, they can download the content, take it home and read it. But then also we do audio conversion for all the books on the fly for them as well. So you create a 1,000-page textbook on physics. Your students can go on, they can read it, the HTML version, they can download PDFs and Microsoft Word, or they can listen to it as an audiobook. And we find a lot of students actually do that. On their bus ride home, they have a reading for the week, they'll just put in their earbuds and they'll listen to their assignment for the week.
Yeah, so great. And the interface is super clean. If people go over there, it's just very streamlined. What is the subject area for EdTech Books?
So EdTech Books is focused on educational technology, at least to start, which is the field where technology and education come together. But we have all kinds of other resources there as well, because we have physics professors or chemistry professors or language professors. So professors that want an Italian or a Spanish textbook, they'll go and put their stuff on there. So EdTech Books is kind of the core or the vanilla version of it, but then we also have these different versions of the site that are more geared towards specific subject areas or institutions. Like BYU Idaho has its own institutional version that has hundreds of books in it, and that there's a book on plastics, there's a book on the family, there's a book on any topic that they're teaching at BYU. So it's less about, so the edtechbooks.org, that is kind of heavy toward educational technology, but there are a lot of other topics in there. And then also we have these kind of splinter sites that use the same software that are more focused on specific topics or specific institutions.
Okay, so there's an opportunity. Other institutions, whatever university could take it and have a white label version that's their university and their books. That's one way this could go.
Right, absolutely. So that allows them to brand all the material as their material, but it also would allow them to have oversight and administrative rights over it. So that was one of the pain points that we ran into, that actually led me to do this. Was there are other open publishing platforms out there, but they're not designed to serve an enterprise audience. So they're designed for like the one-off, the lone scholar who wants to publish a book, but it's not connected to any institution and it's not managed by an institution. And so what this allows us to do is to spin off like an entire like portal like BYU Idaho or BYU that houses all the content for that, and then that institution can use their own or have their own administrators that decide what gets published, when it gets published, what quality assurance mechanisms it goes through, whether or not it aligns with what their expectations are for before they put their university branded or brands on it, and those kinds of things.
Okay, great. Or you could have something that's not university at all. You could have some, I don't know, some collectible like Beanie Babies version where people are only submitting their content about that.
Right.
Sorry for an absurd example.
Yeah, no, that's great. And like we've got, we actually have some examples now of like academic conferences or like these professional organizations that maybe they want to host proceedings, and so but they don't want that to be part of just a larger ecosystem. They want something that is focused just on their or professional organization or on a specific topic area. And so this allows us to put all of that together in a single place. Like one that we're currently working on is called the Open Digital Education Consortium, and so this is a place that we are intentionally creating resources for to provide oral health resources to people all over the world, but then also it also allows for grassroots contribution as well. So anyone interested in providing oral health education materials to this can do so, and we have this so it creates like this oral health focused community with using the EdTech Books software.
Okay, super interesting. So all kinds of potential applications. There's just generally growing demand for digital education, period. Right. So how scalable has the website been? You've grown to 2 million users, so.
Yeah, so really scalable. It's built in the cloud. We're using Amazon or AWS system. It's using modern technologies. The current interface is what's called a single page app, meaning that it's the client side. What's delivered to the client is actually very minimal, bare bones, which helps with being able to deliver it across the world in a way that provides low latency. But then all the data is transferred via API in the background. So that provides a lot of benefits, both for making it accessible, but also allowing for flexibility. So like other developers could, if they gain access to the API, they could build their own systems that are accessing the content or saving content. So it's really scalable in terms of the technology that we're using right now, meaning that we can scale it up to a lot of users very quickly, but it's also scalable in the sense of like the flexibility of what we can do with the data and what we can do with the content that's being created in it.
Okay, so there could be some challenges, like you have to be able to display on every conceivable device, right, because it's all over the world. But have you seen people do interesting things with the API?
No. So currently the API is not available to the public. In an earlier version, we did make it available, but at that time we just hadn't reached a critical mass yet of developers wanting to do much with it. But part of the reason for that too is that we've designed it to be as flexible as possible at the outset. So it's designed to be what's called mobile first, which is a modern approach to web technologies that ensures that when you create something, you're creating it first for a mobile device, and then after that it scales up to desktop or laptop. And that's the reverse of what it used to be. But the reason for that is that it's much easier to scale up from a mobile device to desktop or laptop than it is to scale down. And we find about a third of our users across the world are accessing, actually it's more than a third, it's closer to 40% are accessing on a mobile device. So by designing to be mobile first, that allows it to be used by everyone, but then also it allows it to be repurposed in a lot of different ways, similar to like how YouTube works. So like think about YouTube, not too many people and even not too many institutions use the API. I'm sure there are probably hundreds or thousands, but in terms of like the overall use of YouTube, most organizations that use it don't use the API. And the reason for that is just it's so easy to embed a YouTube video without using the API. They've made intentional design decisions to make it reusable without using any programming. We've done a similar thing. So all of our content can be embedded directly into a learning management system without using the API. And so people at University of Georgia or who are part of an NGO or a non-governmental organization or a nonprofit in Nigeria, they can pull our content into their system without even having to have any coding know-how, similar to how you could do just like embed a YouTube video. So like with my students, so I use it here within our LMS at BYU, And so like in Canvas, which is our LMS, I created a list of modules, or students are going through the content, and all those modules are going out to EdTech Books. And all that I had to do that was to copy the link, and then it's embedded directly into the learning management system. The user doesn't know. The user doesn't know the content's coming from our system. They're having this unified experience within their learning management system. So all that's to say, so much of kind of the flexibility of how it can be used in a variety of contexts is achieved already by just making it really accessible without even having to deal with the API to begin with.
Can you think of any existing websites that maybe should switch over to this? Because I'm thinking if there's like a fan fiction repository or someplace, they'd be better off just using this technology, right?
Yeah. So I mean, when we started, my colleagues and I were using WordPress, and WordPress is one of the biggest blogging platform on the planet. I've seen things like close to like 60 to 80% of the web runs on WordPress. And WordPress is great, but because the way the WordPress is designed, it's designed in certain ways that make it not as useful for these kinds of applications. And so things like it's designed to support really a single user or a small group of users around a single blog. It's also built on older technologies that are, they're trying to keep up, but it just doesn't allow it to do a lot of the things that we can do with more modern technologies. And so anything running WordPress is great, but you have tons of institutions running WordPress. Like when I was at the University of Texas, part of my job there as a student was to manage all the WordPress blogs that our university supported. And there were hundreds, maybe thousands. But the databases for that were huge. And so managing that at an enterprise level it wasn't feasible. And so I used that as kind of my own experience and pain points there of trying to manage all, this very popular software at scale, and the difficulty of doing that to then design how we would go about doing something similar, but doing it at scale. And so lots of institutions actually use WordPress at scale, and it's very difficult. But similar things also, like things like MediaWiki, for instance, wiki services, where you have like an institutional wiki that you're running, or you have like a lot of professional organizations might have a shared wiki. So something like this could replace blogging platforms that have kind of been treated as like a Frankenstein monster that they've like organizations have like tweaked and adjusted to try to get it to do what they want. This is more designed to do exactly what they want out of the box.
Well, and I'm thinking also, I was talking before the broadcast with you about how AI is creating incredible research reports right now. Have you seen an explosion of content? I would think there'd be applications for this that didn't exist a couple of years ago, right? Yeah.
So we're getting all kinds of content, but we're also using AI in very kind of exciting ways to create our own content. So things like and often, like when we talk about AI, like people initially, their first thought goes to chatbots, which is fine because that's kind of where this AI explosion started, or at least in the public zeitgeist or the public mindset. But there's many more applications of AI. So, for example, like when we create content in our system, the audiobooks that I mentioned before, all that's generated with AI on the fly. We can do similar things with translations, and that's in the works right now. So what if, like when you create content, so if I create a textbook for my class, I click publish, and then all of a sudden it's provided in 5 or 10 or 20 languages to anyone in the world. Like that's a huge benefit, right? And so we can use AI to not just create original content, but to create remixes or adjustments of content that are educationally valuable. So translations are a very clear example. Another clear example is leveling of content. So most faculty, they tend to write at a grade level far beyond even graduate education. So like I put things that I write into these tools that test like what the grade level of you're writing at, and it says like 25th grade level or something like that. That shows that like most people are not going to understand what I'm talking about. Versus like the New York Times, writers there tend to write at a 10th grade level. But so if you write a physics textbook, can you use AI to take that same content and level it at multiple levels? So someone coming to your textbook can either read the graduate version of it, the undergraduate version, the high school version, the junior high version. All that's just available to you. You don't have to have your own AI account to try to convert it, but it's just generated already for you, and so then you can access it that way. Other really cool things that we're doing are in our books, authors can create glossaries or dictionaries. But like with a lot of these books, those glossaries end up being hundreds of words. And so like trying to come up with original definitions of hundreds of words is taxing, even if you're an expert in the field. But so what we've done is that if I create a book, you can go to the glossary section, you put in a title or the keyword that you want defined, AI will define it for you, but then you can adjust it as you need it because you're the expert, right? Yeah. And so those kinds of things.
Is that built into the platform, or are you doing that
that's currently built into the platform. And then so like if I define network participatory scholarship, this thing that no one else would know, but then whenever I reference it in the book, if I hover on it, it'll go back and it'll pull up this definition that the AI helped me to create at the outset.
That's super interesting. Well, I love those approaches to the content. I've thought before, shouldn't there be like multiple lengths of a book too? Like if you have a textbook, the 1,000-page version, it's like, I only have time for the 100-page version. Why don't I get that? And I know I'll lose some content, but.
Yeah, absolutely. So AI can help with that, but also like our system is built so that faculty can do that themselves, or authors can do that themselves. So like I'll create a textbook, for instance, and then it's used at a lot of other universities, but because of maybe what their learning objectives are or the number of credits they have to devote to that course, like maybe mine was designed for a 3-credit course and they only have a 1-credit course, they don't want to use the whole book. So often how that's typically addressed in higher education is you just have your students go buy the book anyway, even though they're only going to read the first 2 chapters, which is really frustrating to students. But in this case, what an instructor could do is just go to the first 2 chapters of my book, click copy on each of them, and then it creates their own, spins off or forks their own version of the book. And so what it allows you to do is, as an author, is to remix all this existing content that's out there. I have a colleague at the University of Georgia now who told me a couple years ago when we were just really getting started and it was his first exposure to it. He was teaching a new course, which as faculty, one of the biggest stressors that you face in teaching is when you're teaching a brand new course and you don't have curriculum for that. And so you have to build all that in preparation for the semester. But he said, I went into EdTech Books and within 2 hours, I had a full reader for my course just by pulling from all these different resources that were already there. And it was focused on his course, so it followed the pathway that he wanted for his students to follow. It was branded for his course and all that kind of stuff. So the student experience is just a very linear experience. They're not going to 100 different sites to read these materials that might be locked down or they might have to log into or that might go away because the author on this site deleted the content after having it up for 10 years. But this way, he owns it now, and it's his own version of it. It's his own remixed version. So it allows for a lot of flexibility and control that helps. I mean, there are all kinds of benefits to this, but pedagogically, it's a huge benefit, both for you as the instructor and being able to design your materials, but also for your students to be able to have this unified experience of not having to dig down 20 levels to get to the reading for this week, and then they have to log into 2 systems to get to it and all that kind of stuff. It's just there, and the student can read it or listen to it, and it's super easy.
Awesome. Well, and so if someone were to commercialize this, create some place where they're profiting with this technology, one issue they'll think about is the licensing of the content.
Yeah.
I assume, I don't know if it's complicated or not. It seems like you'd have a community where, like EdTech Books, where it's open source. People are just contributing. This is freely open source, Creative Commons sort of content. Is that how you handle it?
Yeah. So like a lot of stuff, like YouTube often, when you upload stuff to YouTube, either you give up some rights to YouTube, right? And you have to release it under the YouTube the YouTube license or under an open license. With our system, we actually don't impose any licensing requirements on folks when they upload stuff. They maintain ownership of it, so we don't require them to sign anything away to us. So sometimes they'll upload things and they'll keep it as all rights reserved, but often that's typically not what happens because the model that we're following is there is no login or paywall to any of the content, and so normally if you're going to share something on there, you're intending it to be reused. You're intending people to be able to make copies of it or those kinds of things. So we don't require folks to release it under an open license, but we do encourage folks to. And so the open license that I most encourage folks to release under is called the Creative Commons Attribution License, the CC BY, because that allows anyone to take my textbook and remix it or copy it or do anything with it as long as they're citing me. And then you don't have to get into issues of permission and so forth. I know from like an entrepreneurial perspective that sometimes we might struggle with that. Well, am I just giving away content? And how do I build a business around that? But I think what we found in the past 30 years is that increasingly the business models that are built around restricting access to content are just going away. And commercial publishers realize this too. That's why like the Pearsons and the Elsevieres of the world, they've moved away from seeing themselves as content providers to being more service providers. So their main income comes from building services around the content that's there. Because at some point users will just say, you know what, why do I have to pay $100 for a physics textbook when Newtonian mechanics hasn't changed in hundreds of years, right? I can just find this content on Wikipedia or 100 other places online. And so the model of trying to think that we have to put paywalls down around content to support ourselves, I think just isn't sustainable. So the next step, well, what do we do then? Well, we follow the same model that open source software has followed, in that think about like the Ubuntus of the world, or all these Linux distributions that exist out there. The source code is shared freely, but the experts in that area, the maintainers, they then build companies around it where they're providing wraparound services like Ubuntu. It's actually a very similar kind of comparison. Like Ubuntu, they provide their software freely to anybody, but if you want to like manage your Ubuntu servers at scale, then you would get a contract with them, and then they provide these administrative tools around it. So I think that what makes our site so appealing to folks is the open aspect of it. And so you don't want to close that down, because then you get rid of all the grassroots innovation and creativity and creation within it. But what you want to do is build things around that continues to leverage the openness of it, but in a way that is also sustainable. And I think the key to doing that is wraparound services or enterprise level services and administration on the content itself.
Okay, yeah, so if you were to, so a couple things. We mentioned that a startup company could license this technology, and then they could sell white label versions to different universities, or it doesn't have to be universities, it could be corporations, whoever has a set of books they want to share. And by books, we would include reports, documents, whatever.
Right, and I say books because people can just wrap their heads around that. It's any kind of publication, or so it's like a wrapper or a container with content inside. So it's a publication with content.
Could you have it actually be video? A video library.
Well, yeah. So, but it's embedded within HTML, right? So, like a lot of things that people will share would be like they create a book with a video playlist in it. So it's HTML with a bunch of embedded videos. So it's
a playlist or something. Okay. So, so the white label opportunity exists, but then you're implying right there like premium services. What are some examples of services where someone could create a community like this on whatever topic? Veterinary health, whatever, and get their community of people, and then how might they monetize that? Yeah,
so I mean, anything that you want to have administrative oversight on or manage, so like veterinary health, for instance. Well, I don't have any experience with that. I do have some experience like with public health, right? So people sharing erroneous information online. So we've done research studies on how people share false information on Twitter related to gluten or those kinds of things. And this is a serious concern to public health professionals. And so, well, what if you have like a professional organization, a professional dental or medical organization that wants to be sure that you're only providing content that is accurate, that is scientifically valid, and so forth. So you want some kind of administrative oversight around that. And so having something that you can still want people to be able to create content and submit things, but you want to and you want to give them freedom to be able to like create an entire book around like karyology, for instance, which is like how you deal with cavities in dental education. So you want to allow the experts to build their own resources like that, but you still want some level of oversight so you can ensure quality. So it's not just like a blog of just random people putting whatever they want. So if you have like a professional organization, whatever that might be, or an educational organization that you want to provide some administrative oversight or quality assurance checks over, you need a system that allows you to do that. And so that would be one example of what you could do. Other kinds of wraparound services. So earlier, before this huge AI boom, some of the wraparound services that were more kind of premium kinds of features would be things like the audiobooks, like I mentioned. But because of AI, the cost of doing that has gone down so drastically that we don't even have to charge for that anymore, because we can just do it so cheaply. So I think with AI, we're able to provide lots of wraparound services very inexpensively that we otherwise wouldn't be able to. But there's still but that doesn't mean that we can't provide wraparound services. It just raises the bar on the kinds of things that we can provide, right? So like testing services or supplemental materials or test bank creation. Like a lot of those things, like AI, we can leverage to help with that. But you think about like a massive open online course like Stanford or edX might provide. They can provide the content, they can provide the learning materials, they can provide the exams, But like at some level, you have to assess that. At some level, you have to provide feedback to students. And AI can be leveraged for some of those things, but not all of it. But so managing all of that or providing some kind of framework for it's not just the content, but the learning experience around the content. Those are some of the more premium features that could be explored.
Could you monetize just by selling physical copies of the works?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
click order.
Yeah. So we've done some testing with that, where like through Kindle Direct Publishing and some other publishers, where you can take like the PDF version and easily print that off. And that's been a model that a lot of open publishing platforms have used in the past, where you go through a commercial publisher and then you gain a little revenue associated with every printed version of it.
Yeah, and I'm thinking for non-academic things, like say there were a Star Wars version of this, that Disney ran a version of this, you could pay potentially premium features could include, just like you would do on YouTube, like having your video featured higher or advertising it to other users if you really wanted to get out there.
Yeah,
I'm not saying they're great ideas, but there are these other things you could do.
Yeah, I think those are great. Those are great ideas. I mean, another benefit to like this open approach too is just that search engine optimization is really benefited by being open, because so now if someone's searching for something related to topic in educational technology, my resources come up really high in Google results because Google doesn't have to go through a paywall to get through my stuff. And so even just providing these kinds of materials in an open platform alone helps with like say you have an EdTech startup or something and you want to have some content that's freely available. Providing it through a system like this can help support SEO for those kinds of reasons.
Yeah, and it could be a place like also like there are services like Gumroad where you can easily publish ebooks, and so you might link to those from another website. So this could be a place where maybe on LinkedIn, if you want to share a report with people, it clicks through to here or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you would have to monetize that. So so imagine an entrepreneur finds a use case where they're like, oh no, these guys haven't thought of it, but here's what we need to do with the EdTech Books tech. What would be the steps for them, like in terms of getting the software, hosting it? Like what things would they have to do?
Yeah, I mean, so there are a few different routes. So I mean, first reach out to us and let's talk about it. But yeah, so the software is it's built in Node, which is a common programming language. And so, we could work through the Office of Tech Transfer here to license it and those kinds of things if they want to have their own installation of it. But as I said before, we also it's all available through an API as well. So they could be provided a key, and then they could build things that are accessing the API either to just access content or to access and edit or create content as well. So if you wanted to build an app or embed something into your existing system, then you could do something like that.
Okay, and it does seem like all the technical heavy lifting has been done. It's just a matter of coming up with a business marketing angle that makes sense for someone.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, fantastic. You've created something really great here. Just for anyone, if you haven't used edtechbooks.org, just go check it out. You'll see how clean and easy it is to use. Are there future features you're thinking of? Anything you want to?
Yeah, I mean, with the whole AI boom, like everyone's focused on AI, and so we are too. So just doing more exciting things with AI, like the translations that I mentioned. That's one that I'm in the midst of working on right now. So that's a big one. I mentioned like the leveling of content. But I'm an I'm an instructional designer. I train instructional designers. So a lot of what I think about too is not just creating content, but improving the learning experience. Like how do we actually help people learn as they're engaging with content? So we're not just providing them, a bunch of readings, but like what do we actually expect them to do to engage with the content? We can use AI to help us do that. So using AI to like embed prompts or embed learning checks, like multiple choice questions, or to do other things to try to assess whether or not they're actually learning. So those are some of the things that we're building in right now. We have pretty robust analytics associated with all of it as well. And so we can get to a point where we can, like for instance, we can actually predict if someone read the page. And so building that back into or connecting that back into learning management systems is going to be really exciting. So that like say if I'm an instructor, I've assigned a reading, potentially I could have like a dashboard or something in Canvas where I could see, okay, these are the students that actually read it, these are the students that didn't, and then I can connect that to their performance on their assessment. Oh, maybe reading this actually helps you to do better on the assessment, and so then I can show that to my students and prove to them. But also, I can use it for intervention purposes to remind students to go that they need to go do this, or they've only read half of the reading, and so they need to go finish before they come to class, or those kinds of things.
Well, and so you raised one other one I have to flag, is that there's always the data analytics aspect of it too. If you make a huge amount of books available, of data available, you're going to learn about what people like, what they don't like, what's hard to consume, and so on. So.
Yeah, and so I mean, some of the things that we've done in the past that have brought us to where we are is doing what's called A/B testing or split testing, which is something that a lot of big companies do, like Facebook. If you open the Facebook app and you look at your neighbor's Facebook app, often they're different. So they might have. I've seen things saying that there at any given time there might be 27 versions of the Facebook app at any given time, because they're constantly testing it and testing. What gets you to click more? Is it if this icon has a label on it or doesn't have a label? And so we've done a lot of things like that in EdTech Books, and I'm really excited about merging that with AI some. And so the idea of providing multiple versions of content, seeing how that affects learners, but then also having AI to help us to predict what kinds of changes might be helpful moving forward. And so there's a lot of cool things that we could do.
Okay, well, it's fantastic technology. Thanks for talking to us about it, Royce. Super interesting. We're looking for the right entrepreneur to go take it in new directions, and that'll be fun to see.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.